something different from our regular school briefs episodes, Claire?
Absolutely. And it's time for us to do, is this a school long rather than a school brief? I don't know.
Yeah, that's right. But, over the term break, people would have seen lots of stuff on social media around an urgent case in the Waitangi Tribunal to do with general curriculum reform and the removal of Section 127 from the Education and Training Act. And people involved with AEC followed that quite closely. It was definitely the first kind of tribunal hearings I've kind of listened to live, Claire. Was that the same for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And if anyone did manage to watch any of it, I don't know about them, but I thought it was actually riveting viewing. And I think people thought I was being facetious when I first said that. But, it was actually really interesting to watch that unfold live, particularly because I think it was such a huge issue for education in Aotearoa. I mean, I'm worried that people haven't latched on to how big an issue the whole topic was that they were discussing in that tribunal hearing. What was your thoughts, Liam? Sort of, it's crazy, how important it is.
Yeah, I think it was the kind of size of the information that was spoken about there. It was. I found it really enjoyable having senior leaders within the Ministry of Education had their feet held to the fire in terms of being forced to kind of answer questions. But I think we came away with this kind of overwhelming sense that actually so much of this information actually has to get out there, which I guess has kind of brought us to today. We're really lucky to have Professor Richard Manning with us today. Richard, we just want to start by thanking you for the huge amount of work that went into your submission, and we're really keen to dig a little bit deeper into what was in your submission as part of a number of these conversations that we want to have with people that have submitted. So can I pass over to you to kind of introduce yourself and then maybe give us a little bit of background around what led you to the tribunal?
Kia ora, kōrua. Firstly, a bit of a disclaimer. I wish I was a professor. I'm just a associate professor, so I better, remain humble. I thought I got a promotion at the tribunal last week when the lawyer kept calling me that. So anyway.
Did you get called a learned friend? That was one of my favourite bits of the tribunal.
I got called professor, and finally one of the panellists reminded our lawyer that, no, I'm an associate professor, so I'm not getting a pay rise anytime soon, damn it. So anyway, my background. Where do you start? I guess I am a product of the Puriru East schooling system. I went through primary school, secondary school in Puriru, went to University in Wellington, Victoria. I have worked as a historian. I've worked for the Māori Affairs Department, Iwi Transition Agency. I've worked as a Waitangi Tribunal claims inquiry facilitator. So I've been about the traps, but I've also taught secondary school history in the Wellington region for quite a few years. So a historian and a history educator is how I describe myself. UC Faculty of Education is where I am now. And how did I get to this claim? I guess my research has always been about the status of Māori histories, and I've always been very concerned that, when I was doing my PhD and before that if Māori histories were being taught, it always felt that was histories taught from somewhere else. So someone growing up in Puriru or Wellington, I didn't see local iwi narratives. I've mentioned in the claim that, while I'm Pākehā with Irish ancestry, plenty of my extended family are Māori. My tuakana, my older brother, is from Ngāti Raukawa, Ngāti Toa. So I grew up as a child with a lot of stories through family about these people, but I never heard those stories or saw those stories at school. So I was quite privileged as a Pākehā child growing up in Porirua, hearing those narratives that certainly weren't in the textbooks that were put before us. So that's how I got into it. More recently, so I did my PhD looking at the status of Te Atiawa histories of place in the Wellington region, particularly the Port Nicholson block. And what I found in a 2005 survey, I had to use the Official Information Act, was that after all the information was released, close to a third of Wellington District secondary schools back in 2005 were not teaching any Māori history of any form. Often New Zealand histories was sidestepped. And if Māori content was taught, like I said, I could quantify the extent to which it was somewhere else. And the Waitangi Tribunal around that time had found evidence in the Tūranga Nui a Kiwi area, which is the Gisborne area. They concluded that a big problem in New Zealand society is that we don't know our local stories. We don't. And, for me, I've long argued I was able to co-construct my PhD with friends from within Te Aotearoa. So it was co-constructed with Te Aotearoa, and we engaged teachers of history to have a conversation around things like what is history, but the importance of place, and particularly like in the Wellington region where you have schools that are built atop of pa sites, burial sites, food gathering sites. These are our stories. And I think all the educational research stresses the importance of building on the local, which is tangible for children, very young children, and to gradually work outwards. So when these reforms were kicking in, and I was working on a Marsden project with Associate Professor Nepia Mahuika from Massey University, we were studying, as part of the Marsden, iwi perspectives on teaching history. And I was monitoring what was happening in the political realm. So I think we have lost video.
We've still got you.
Oh,
yeah,
so
you're all good.
Got me.
Now,
yeah.
Okay. Sorry. So it's particularly around 2023, leading up to the election, I became quite alarmed by what I was observing in the political, if you like, the political realm. What was happening online, and it resembled a lot of the culture wars type narratives that we'd seen in other countries and that I'd studied during my thesis. So I shared my concerns with the sector, with the NZEI and other unions, the PPTA, the New Zealand History Teachers Association. So eventually the NZEI invited me to, to collaborate with Nepia and to produce evidence to document the political drivers behind the push to quote, restore balance in this curriculum. I was also asked who has and who has not been included in writing the social sciences draft curriculum, and to consider the impact of a standardised national history curriculum on Treaty of Waitangi, on the Crown's Treaty principles. But I would add that there's also implications for this government in terms of its responsibilities to uphold the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. So
it's important for people to realise that this hearing, when we first sort of heard about it, was focusing on the removal of Te Tiriti from Section 127. But actually, the hearing covered a whole lot more in terms of the histories curriculum, Te Mātaiaho as we knew it then and know it now. Yes. And so it ended up being much bigger, didn't it? In a lot of senses.
Yeah, and I think that the thing was to show the impact of removing Section 1271D from the Act would have these sorts of implications. I mean, removal of the NELP, and clearly an ideological attack on the Aotearoa New Zealand Histories curriculum. Well, and again, that's coming from my angle, but a lot of other curriculum areas were involved in making submissions of evidence. It's just it was an urgent claim. There was not the time for all those people who contributed evidence to make their verbal submissions to the panel.
Yeah.
Richard,
and sorry, Liam, you go.
No. If you were going to carry on with that, you go.
No, I was just interested in diving a bit more into each of the separate ones, but you asked your question. You think the ones
reading into your submission, Richard, the bit that stood out for me, was just the really extreme views of some of the people that have ended up in really influential positions,
Yes.
and also um, the connection that they've all got to each other through various different organisations.
Yeah.
Uh, and and your submission did a good job into kind of digging into the background of kind of previous comments and the kind of overlap between how they've gotten to know each other.
Yeah.
Were you struck by the kind of extreme views and kind of how they've been kind of sanitized through this process?
Um, I'm shocked. Disappointed is probably the word I'd be looking for, because these are academics, in some instances. And what I really wanted to show is that the extreme right and the racist narratives that we often find on social media, what I'd noticed, I've seen it even in LinkedIn. During the election itself, we know there was a lot of traffic on. Oh gosh, I've forgotten that platform. It's an extreme platform, um, but often these extremists, who tend to subscribe to a Hobson's Pledge type worldview of the treaty, they were constantly referring to Professor Paul Moon and often to Professor Elizabeth Rata. And these two academics are well known to each other. And there was a narrative which became a mantra, that this curriculum is it's idea that, the far right narrative around the Aotearoa New Zealand histories curriculum that was doing the rounds on right wing social media platforms and mainstream platforms too, was that it's ideological. So, for example, a good starting point is someone like Julian Batchelor. During that 2023 election campaign, he had a Stop Co-Governance tour of New Zealand, which attracted a lot of media attention, and frequently during the tour and after the tour, he made allegations that teachers were, if you like, he literally said that schools are grooming children. He's warning parents that schools are grooming children, and he
because
based
he was
that.
worried about the Toby Morris book, wasn't he? The one that was going out, and became very popular.
And he made some outrage. He said your children are being groomed to believe that Māori have been hard done by, etc., etc. So complaints were made about his pamphlets, and he made these outrageous claims in his pamphlets that expecting children to learn te reo Māori is akin to child abuse. And he said that saying words like kia ora is like saying Hail Hitler. I mean, pretty outrageous stuff, right?
Yeah.
But he eventually takes Dr. Sanjana Hatotua of the Disinformation Project and Television New Zealand to court on the grounds of defamation, and he's unsuccessful. And during the trial, this came out last year. He was asked by Judge David Clark during the defamation trial to explain who was funding his legal counsel. And his legal counsel, and I wait for this, is Steve Franks, a former ACT Party member, but also, closely connected to the Free Speech Union. The same Free Speech Union that Elizabeth Rata and Paul Moon were very actively involved with. Now, I'm not saying they're directly involved with Batchelor, but there's a recurring pattern which suggests Free Speech Union interest in the history curriculum.
So what would you say Julian's relationship is with the curriculum that was then drafted? What's his relationship to that?
I think what I'm trying to say is that his campaign, as Sanjana Hatotua and the Disinformation Project showed, had a lot of public interest, had a lot of attraction, and they were making a lot of noise, and they were whipping up this campaign, not just about Stop Co-Governance, but there were attacks directed at the Aotearoa New Zealand Histories curriculum, allegations of indoctrination. So it's not just him. You've got Roger Childs, who's a retired head of department history, who makes a submission to the ministry criticising the 2021 draft of the Aotearoa New Zealand Histories curriculum. and he's quoting Paul Moon to argue, he warned that, he said, look, Paul Moon has warned us that if done poorly, compulsory histories in our school could veer into the realm of indoctrination. And he basically argues that it has. And then he goes on repeatedly to cite Elizabeth Rata.
Mm-hmm.
By 2023, he's produced a book published by Tross Publishing, and it's the title is something like New Zealand History or Indoctrination. Tross Publishing, as everyone knows, is a...
So is your argument that these people are sort of the people that are behind the need for this concept of rebalancing the curriculum, the history curriculum?
Yeah, I think what you have to do is go on to Moon. You have to look at these are the more kind of extreme, if you like, non-academic voices out there making a lot of noise, but they do keep going back to Professor Paul Moon and to Professor Rada. And I think what's a real concern is, I had started observing Moon on his appearances with Sean Plunkett on the platform. And he made some pretty outraging allegations. He basically said that the writing of the draft Aotearoa New Zealand Histories curriculum reflected a clandestine process. He suggested that the ministry had withheld the names of those who were involved. I'll read to you verbatim what he said. The process that the ministry adopted was, I think, appalling. They developed the curriculum, and I'm not sure who developed it. That is concerning. Their names weren't put to the document, and when you read the document, there's plenty good reason for that when you get really clumsy. So he goes into the minutiae. But the fact is, these names were widely known. They were all over the ministry website. There were videos all over the internet with these people featuring and talking about what this new curriculum is. So people like Professor Michael Belgrave, Professor Aroha Harris, Professor Damon Salesa, you've got Associate Professor Nepia Mahuika, Dr. Manying Ip, we've got Dr. Mark Sheehan, Dr. Graham Aitken, we've got numerous teachers, and they're named. We know who they are. There's transparency. We have not seen anything like that with this draft social sciences curriculum.
I mean, that is a really ironic statement to make, given the use of NDAs around this government's current approach to curriculum.
That's
but
right.
I think that idea of a statement like that just kind of feeds into this kind of idea that there is a deliberate lack of transparency out there.
Yeah.
Because you quoted in your submission Professor Moon's comments around the lack of balance and that there's privileged narratives where some New Zealanders getting access to things over others, but would never go as far as kind of naming who the others and who the some were.
Yeah.
And so for me, comments like that look to create space for some of the more extreme people like Julian Bixler to go out there and in that kind of social media misinformation world, people start to connect those dots.
Yeah, exactly.
The book that your submission then went on to, that really resonated with me because I remember reading it back at the time thinking this is a really poor piece of work, is Eero's report.
I was going to come to Eero's
straight after the change of government around Aotearoa histories.
Yeah.
And I was a really big fan of the work that Eero was doing around 8 years ago with their kind of insight reports. I did feel that straight after the change of government, there was a kind of mood shifting because they were making some pretty generalised claims of not a lot of data. Are you able to kind of speak to the kind of concerns you had around
a bit of manufacturing crisis that seemed to happen? They happened with NCA and happened with this.
Yeah. Well, it was. Let's just go back to Moon quickly because it sets the scene. Moon constantly used this word about the lack of balance. He was implying, as you said, he insinuated that some New Zealanders were more equal than others. We all know who. This is. He's being anti-Māori without being obvious, and it fans the flames, as you're saying, in an election campaign. That is my opinion. When we get to the Eero report, it talks about balance, but it said that it had academic experts involved. I wrote multiple OIA requests for more transparency. And the best I got out of them was there was less than 5 academics, more than 2. They said they didn't keep any demographic data on the ethnicity of those involved. This is now a standard line of government. So, well, and yet they claim they were good treaty partners. Well, how can you be a good treaty partner if you don't know whether you've engaged with Māori or not? So those kind of stupid statements coming back in OIA responses. If you look at the report itself, that the methodology, firstly, you have to remember it didn't consider the implementation of Te Takanga o Te Wā. So it focused on the NZC. It was quite as a review months after this, the Aotearoa New Zealand histories had become mandated. Here's the thing that really stunned me. For only one kaumātua was interviewed. The ERA research team did not interview iwi or hapu or Māori historians, no Māori academic experts. Like I said, they withheld the identities of the academic experts. It was conducted in great haste. There was the NZCER report, which basically highlighted some of the flaws in the ERO methodology. In fact, we had NZCER researchers come out and politely critique the ERO report in the press. And that's quite something. I just going to find another finding. It also looked over its own positive findings. For example, it found that 3/4 of teachers it surveyed felt confident. And I think the other thing that was really encouraging was ERA concluded that ākonga it surveyed are twice as likely to enjoy learning history when they see themselves, their whānau community involved in it. And Māori and Pacifica students especially enjoyed the new history curriculum. So it's like you're chucking the baby out with the bathwater, seemed to be the general consensus.
And only a very short period of time that it had been introduced as well. So it wasn't even familiar. It wasn't bedded in. It was, making a whole lot of sweeping assumptions and statements really quickly after it had been introduced. Because it does feel like we've now started to see a bit of a pattern. We've seen this with NCEA Level 1 as well, where we saw research literally just after it's been rolled out, and then cherry-picked data from the research used as a sort of manufactured crisis that means we have to, whip everything back or remove it or take it away.
And ERO's big findings were there's too much emphasis on local and Māori history. Well, that's because this is all relatively new content, and that's what the NZCR concluded as well. This is all very new. And it also aligns nicely with the concerns of Professor Moon and Professor Rata. Professor Rata has repeatedly, and I've quoted her throughout my research, she bemoaned the fact that a local curriculum is a license for tribalism and that it's anti-tribal, that it's anti-democratic. And, that this idea that you can have a generic one-size-fits-all Māori culture should replace it. But we all know that Mātauranga sits in a context of place, and it's specific to hapu and iwi and whānau in the context of the places they live in.
So we had the ERO report. Yep. Off the back of the ERO report, we have a draft social sciences curriculum that is supposedly representing a rebalancing that's going to save us from the tribalism and everything else that Aotearoa New Zealand history's represented. What's your concerns around the impact of that draft history curriculum? What's your views on that? That was another part of your...
Again, I can only support what Jane Jarman from the New Zealand History Teachers Association said when she presented to the tribunal. I support what the New Zealand History Teachers Association have said in an open letter to the Minister. It's a real concern. This curriculum is more like a pub quiz. I wouldn't call it a curriculum. The New Zealand History strand for the strand in the social sciences curriculum itself feels more like a pub quiz. Yeah. It's poorly poorly structured. Yeah.
Just because of is it just a series of sort of facts rather than any depth?
101 useless contestable facts, because some facts are not facts, they're opinions. And whose facts, who chooses the facts, really important. And for me, the secrecy surrounding who's who in the zoo, who's actually been in the tent making those decisions. And what we should be really concerned about, as I said before, previously there was a lot of transparency and the public would know exactly which professional bodies were involved. Like if we're talking history, the New Zealand History Association was involved, represented by Michael Belgrave. Māori historians were represented through Te Pauhiri Kōrero, which is a network of Māori historians. Pacifica historians were represented by Damon Salesa. We don't know who was involved in writing this, apart from Paul Moon, who publicly came out and proclaimed this draft curriculum as a triumph and swore he was politically neutral.
Oh gosh, what an easy thing to claim.
Yeah.
The other part is that the direction of the social sciences curriculum, it isn't disconnected from the kind of larger curriculum reform that we are seeing, and the connections you make back to the kind of Atlas network.
Yeah.
I think is caught up in that kind of broader issue that we've got around the kind of science of learning and a very kind of narrow understanding of kind of what good curriculum looks like. At the tribunal, was your sense that that kind of connection got made to the larger curriculum reform going on?
Yes, absolutely. I sat there through 4 days of hearings, and the impression I left with was the tribunal panel is very well aware of what's at stake. I think they have a very good handle of the influence of the Atlas network, through affiliates like the New Zealand Initiative, the Taxpayers Union, which basically funded and created the Free Speech Union. I think there's a real awareness of that. They're certainly aware of Ben Jensen and his influence on the minister. I think some very good questions were asked by the tribunal. Not just in relation to Aotearoa New Zealand histories, but the broader curriculum and this whole notion of a knowledge-rich curriculum and the ideologies underpinning that, and also the fact that it's quite obvious they're aware how this sits in relation to a global culture war or culture wars, plural.
Yeah, because I found it really very interesting in terms of when you zoom out from the Waitangi Tribunal hearing. You were one piece of the puzzle. So you were talking in the context of New Zealand, Aotearoa New Zealand histories and the draft history curriculum. We had the likes of Bevan, who talked to, and others that talked to the English curriculum and the changing drafts and removal of referral to Māori and Pacific authors. We had the likes of Therese and Bruce Jepson talking back to Mataiaho, and the fact that we have a 2023 vision that Dr. Wainata is central to, and it is a glorious document, and then we've got this watered down version that we've seeing that term still used now, but it's certainly not the document. As well as the removal of Te Tiriti from section 127. So it paints a really disturbing, but in terms of just the breadth of, I keep coming back to, and maybe this is wrong of me, but I keep coming back to, there was this big palaver about the voting down of the Treaty Principles Bill, saying, we're not going to have a bar of the Treaty Principles Bill.
Yeah.
And yet we're seeing evidence of it happening anyway.
Well, I think people, to be fair, I think people were wrong to think that just because the Treaty Principles Bill had come to a premature, come to its end.
Yeah,
there was always the New Zealand First Coalition deal with National, and people took their eyes off the ball, if you like,
and thought they were safe because that one wasn't happening. It's like, no, it's happening anyway, people.
Yeah. And it just so happened conveniently that this bill was dropped on our hearing the night before it commenced. So out of the blue, and I think the claim's been really important because it's actually forced the Crown to to bring this to the surface, to the light of day, and it raises questions about the honour of the Crown. And whether or not we're going to get a fair hearing. We were concerned that they've already determined the outcome, and that the whole point is that the Crown should be waiting to hear the recommendations of the tribunal, which it might still choose to ignore. But we're entitled to that hearing and to be heard.
But also that the National Party within the coalition government can now no longer claim that this is just some of the kind of minority parties going about their work, because you've got the Minister of Education and the Minister of Justice, who are both spokespeople for the National Party, right in behind the current dismantling of kind of Māori Crown relationships.
This is a coalition parties doing it.
To just go back into your submission one more time around the sense I got that the kind of far-right academic community is actually quite small in size.
It is,
For the tribunal, we saw that when the ministry wanted to go and do a literature review around what knowledge-rich was, their kind of key academic in there was Elizabeth Rata.
Yeah.
And then you go and get the UK also quoting Elizabeth Rata's work. And so it's this kind of everybody's report is using the kind of same single person at the kind of centre, but then going, well, we've got this report and this report and this report justifying what knowledge rich is and why we should be doing it.
And again, it's important to understand those international networks and how they work, and that the fact is that they are an international echo chamber, which is online, and they just regurgitate, recite each other's work, but it's a very
so they've all
small
got the same
academic
reference list. One finite reference list.
And they don't. And I can't stress this enough. I mean, I've asked this repeatedly. What mandate does Paul Moon have from his peers, his fellow historians, to be sitting at that table making significant decisions about the future teaching of history in this country? He has no mandate, but he's a political appointment. Elizabeth Rata, where's her mandate? She has none. She is a political appointment. People were appointed to the MAG against the advice of the ministry. They were political appointments.
Have you ever seen, I'm blown away recently that there seems to be a near complete dismissal of OECD reports, UNESCO reports, UN, stuff that comes out of the UN, like all of those bodies that we would usually default to and would be at the backbone of the research that informs decision making in the Ministry of Education. Is it just me, or do they seem to be just dismissed, like we're pretending that they don't exist?
It certainly feels like that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it's a concern. And again, it's I guess I'd be encouraging people to go online and look at Minister Stanford's proactive releases of meetings. I think that I'm always trying to look at the pluses. I think, despite all the not so good stuff that's happened, I think there's been a lot of people suddenly interested in using the Official Information Act and trying to find out what's going on. I think there's been a bit of conscientisation, if you will. I found it interesting, the sort of people she was talking to while she was in Britain. I was stunned that she would spend time with Reverend Ian Paisley Jr. And Paul Givan. If you understand who his father was, if you understand Northern Irish politics, if you understand that man's stance on Indigenous languages in Ireland and the introduction of the Irish language in school, I'm asking, so how does that translate back home? So I think you're right, Liam. We need to understand that National are fully behind very much an anti-treatyist party. New Zealand First Act appear to have been doing the heavy lifting, but for me, it's more like a bull's head where the two horns, that the head is the National Party. That's where the bulk is. That's where the impetus and the weight is. But those horns appear to be doing the damage, if that makes sense as a metaphor.
Yeah.
but they're working in tandem. They're not National are not the goodies. They're not the National Party of Chris Finlayson or Jim Bolger.
Yeah, because it's quite interesting because our minister historically has often been viewed as one of the most centrist members of the National Party, yet I'm not seeing that in the actions. Like
No,
it's quite interesting. It's not reflected in decisions that have been made. So,
no,
in terms of the Waitangi Tribunal, it's finished its physical hearing. I think
yeah,
there's still some written responses to come
yeah,
through,
trickling in.
trickling in.
Yep.
What happens now? Like, what is the teeth that the Waitangi Tribunal have? Like, what is going to be the impact of the report that comes out of this?
Firstly, there will be an interim report within 2 weeks, and then I'm hoping another 2-3 weeks after that, the full and final report. The cynic might say the tribunal is a toothless tiger, and there's truth in that. The tribunal can only make recommendations, but the value of having a tribunal report is it does have clout.
Yeah.
And you've been able to, I'm trying to find the right words here, but pull together so much evidence. There's so many briefs of evidence that have come forward. I would be suggesting that you now have a very strong platform to continue to take legal and other action based on that report. So good luck to the ministry and the minister if they ignore the findings of this report, the recommendations. I think the public will sit up and be gobsmacked when they
I think
see
it's
what
a
the
shot across
tribunal
the bow.
finds.
Like
it is.
This is a warning signal to
It is.
everyone of the direction of travel that we're going in, and I think people ignore it at their peril. In terms of, I think it actually is. It's laid bare the fact that the very fabric of the sort of democracy and community that we're so proud of, in terms of a bicultural community, so proud of our Treaty of Waitangi and Te Tiriti and what that represents, is actually very seriously under threat.
It is. I think what this claim shows is the nature of the attack on democracy in this country, the use of non-disclosure agreements to effectively gag academics who are afraid to speak out regarding the concerns they have about behaviour they witness from Crown officials in those contributor groups. It's had a chilling effect on academia. It's had a chilling effect on teachers. We had I've forgotten Sophie's surname. Sorry, Sophie, if you're watching. She attended the tribunal hearing with Te Kura Kaupapa, Te Kura Iwi, etc. I've forgotten the group she was with, but she could not speak because she was tied up in knots by an NDA. So I think this claim has illuminated a lot of things that I don't think most New Zealanders would find acceptable in terms of how a government goes about its business.
Yeah, look, to be honest, I'm looking at the clock, and we've gone kind of well beyond what we said. And look, I'm kind of naturally kind of glass half full kind of guy, and so I mean, this was never going to be a kind of single bullet to kind of, change the direction of this type of government. But as a kind of line in the sand around using a proper instrument of government like the tribunal to say actually this isn't good enough. The other bit that I guess we're going to see play out later in the year come election time is that I honestly believe that they've misjudged where Middle New Zealand is on this. And to connect it back into your submission, I think that's shown up by some of the really extreme people that they've had kind of shaping this work. And I felt the first go at Aotearoa Histories was a bit of a kind of watershed moment for helping shift a lot of views around the importance of young people understanding who they are and where they're from. Both Māori and non-Māori was the feedback that I got. People took way more pride in their local community, knowing stories about the whenua and what had happened.
I saw nothing but excitement for localised curriculum and understanding those local histories, and it was just bizarre. It was sort of like there was no pushback that whatsoever. And then all of a sudden we're told that it's, heading in the wrong direction and we need to be rebalanced. It's like, it just didn't make sense. But yeah, like Liam, I'm aware that we could talk and we could talk and we could talk. But Richard, thank you so much for joining us today and giving us some insight into your particular submission. This, as Liam mentioned before, we're aiming to have a series of these discussions to help people understand what was sort of presented at the Waitangi Tribunal, but also just so we can all collectively understand what has actually been happening and what's at risk in this space as well. So thank you so much. I really, really enjoyed it. We did lose your moving face. So I'm really hoping that your still face stays on screen and it's just not me and Liam nodding sagely throughout the whole thing.
Don't worry, I have been nodding,
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So without further ado, thank you to everyone who joined us today for this. This will be one of many discussions we'll be having about the urgent hearing with the Waitangi Tribunal. So thank you all. And as always, if you've got any other people you think we should be talking to, anything you want us to be talking about, just drop us a line and let us know. Thank you.
Okay. Take care. Ka kite.